Hey guys, and welcome to the video. The following is a video that I've wanted to do for a while now, but I was never really sure how I'd go about it, and there were lots of reasons I was thinking maybe I shouldn't do it, but nonetheless, I finally willed myself to make this video. So I hope you guys enjoy. Sit back and relax. Swords. Swords, swords, swords. I bet you're probably wondering what this video is going to be about. Possibly warhammers, or maybe bows. Maybe instead it will be about spears or axes maybe. Well, as you can probably already tell by now, today's video will instead be all about the coolest swords in gaming. This is by no means a ranking, and of course all the swords I talk about are merely my opinion. I'm also going to give each one an overall score in two criteria, being design and backstory. Now, unfortunately, some swords on this list don't have much of a backstory, or that's not a big part of why I like them, so expect most of this list to be based on designs instead, but I will go over the story and the context of all the swords. So, without further ado, let's get to it with our first sword. For me to really explain the awesomeness that is Xenoblade Chronicles Monado, I'm sadly going to have to spoil the entire game. So if you are currently playing the game, or intend to in the future, I really do not recommend watching this segment. There will be massive spoilers. So I will place a timestamp on screen of when the section ends now. With that being said, if you've already beaten the game, or just don't care about spoilers, welcome. It's time to gush about the Monado. Design-wise, the Monado at first glance can appear pretty dull and uninteresting. The sword is mainly made of a red metal, giving it a sort of plasticky appearance. All parts of the sword are in fact made of the same material, meaning it doesn't have much variety aesthetically. Near the middle of the sword, before the blade slimmens to form the handle, there is a large circular hole which at first glance seems unnecessary and even obtrusive. But, when somebody picks it up, the sword's appearance quickly drastically changes. Blue streaks of light begin emanating throughout the sword, before the right hand side of the blade lowers and is detached, leaving a gap at the top of the sword. It is through this gap that, from the hole, a blade of energy appears, able to cut through almost anything with ease. This is the actual blade of the Monado. Streaks of blue lightning also encircle the sword in its new form, giving it a volatile and dangerous appearance. This blue energy that follows the contours of the sword in lines are also unique in that they can change colour depending on which Monado art is equipped. Each different art represents a different power the Monado can currently use. Additionally, each art will display a different Japanese symbol in the circle, giving it a somewhat Asian appearance. But there's more. The sword also has two additional forms seen throughout the game. The first is more in keeping with the original design, sticking with the sword being primarily red, par the blue energy which courses through it when activated. What does change this time around is that the tip and lower part of the blade become much longer and take on a sharper appearance, representative of the increase in power. Finally, there is the Monado 3. The Monado 3 sports a completely different design from the others, doing away with the red-blue colour scheme entirely, with the entire sword instead consisting of an otherworldly, bright blue material. It has a very kind of ethereal and otherworldly quality to it. One big change is that it is now entirely symmetrical. The pommel at the bottom, which is this part here, also changes shape, this time resembling more of an inverted pyramid than a circle. In terms of the actual blade part of it, it repeatedly protrudes outwards, somewhat resembling wings and giving it a very elegant yet simultaneously jagged and ruthless feel, before it curves inwards to a sharp point. It is by far the most powerful of the three Monado forms, being capable of felling even gods. With this tool at your disposal, nothing can stand in your way. Design-wise, I think the Monado is fantastic and almost perfect, so I'll give it a 9. The only thing I don't like is how it can look kind of plasticky in the game at times. But how does the Monado fare in the backstory department? It is said that long ago, during the ancient battle between the two titans of the Xenoblade universe, the Bionis and the Mechonis. The Bionis wielded the Monado and won the battle. Now, it must once again be used to combat an enemy from the corpse of the Mechonis, the Mechon, because although the titans are now lifeless corpses, the battle still wages on. The Monado is unique in this regard, since it is in fact the only weapon capable of damaging the Mechon. But strangely, there are certain Mechon, those with faces, which the sword can't damage. This is because the sword is incapable of damaging people, who pilot the face units. Egil, the leader of the opposing titan Mechonis, realised this weakness and created the faces for that very purpose. The reason it cannot harm people is that its creator, Zanza, and thus the Bionis, is the progenitor of humans, or rather Homs as they are known in the Xenoblade universe, and since he relies on the death of those humans for sustenance, by his own means, and his continued existence, a weapon capable of taking that energy away from him would be inherently self-destructive. This constraint is lifted about halfway through the story, which is when the sword transforms into the Monado 2. Finally, the Monado 3 is activated when Shulk takes control over his own destiny, manifesting his own desire, and that of Alvis, the overseer of this world, into his own Monado, one capable of felling a god, one capable of killing Zanza, and ending the cycle of death and rebirth he brought about. In the story department, I'm going to give the Monado a 10 out of 10. Admittedly, maybe I'm biased, since Xenoblade Chronicles is one of my favourite games of all time, but I truly believe that the Monado is a badass, incredible sword with great creativity in both its design and history. The Master Sword is certainly much more well known than the Monado, hailing from a more popular franchise, The Legend of Zelda. Just like the Monado, the sword has an awesome design and intricate backstory, so let's talk about it. Before I go on, however, please be aware that there will be major spoilers for The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, a game which is integral to the history of this legendary blade. The game is actually coming out on Switch in about a month, I think, and it's a really good game, so I recommend you guys pick it up if you haven't already, but that is kind of not the point of this video. Anyway, let's get to talking about the Master Sword. Design-wise, the Master Sword is brilliant in that it manages to be simplistic, yet also elegant, intricate, and threatening to its enemies. It has a commonplace overall design, with a hilt, handle, blade, and pommel, with the beauty coming in its intricacies and details. The pommel is an inverted cone-like shape, which bends into a point, giving the sword a very pointed appearance. At the widest part of this cone, it bends the other direction into a smaller shape until it reaches the handle. The handle in question is a cylindrical piece of blue metal with a green material looped around it. It's really awesome the way these two colours contrast so well with each other without being too apparent at first glance. Next, the guard, which is this part of the sword, has a unique wing-like design, connoting elegance and sophistication. It's coloured a deep blue colour, similar to the handle and pommel. This is important as it establishes a consistent colour scheme throughout the blade. It also has some smaller golden parts which clash nicely with the darker blue colour and give the sword a more regal appearance. This could also be seen as a reference to the golden colour of the Triforce, a mythical object highly important in the Zelda series. Continuing up the sword, we witness a transition between the guard and the blade itself, which is also established by these two golden marks. The blade is constructed of a traditional grey steel, but is unique in that it glows when close to Ganondorf or anything associated with him, such as Malice, as he is the villain of the Legend of Zelda series. Another unique thing about the blade that helps to set it apart from other swords is that it momentarily bulges outwards before bending back inwards to its original width. This was most likely done to make room for an engravement of the aforementioned Triforce, signifying the sword's connection to the divine object and its divine origins. The rest of the blade is fairly simple, curving inwards to a sharp point. Design-wise, the Master Sword, despite appearing fairly ordinary at first glance, has tons of hidden details and intricacies that help to set it apart from other swords, and make it just plain awesome looking. For this reason, I'll give it an 8 in terms of design. Next, let's talk about its backstory. It all began long, long ago, when a force of great evil ruled the world. But, high in the skies, a force of good searched for a way to fight back. The goddess Hylia forged the Goddess Sword, and placed inside it a spirit known as Phi. This sword was capable of damaging the demons of the surface world. She also assigned a chosen hero, Link, who would wield the mythical blade. However, at this time the sword was not fully strengthened, and hadn't achieved its full potential. To do this, the chosen hero, Link, journeyed alongside Phi to free sacred flames across the surface world, which increased its capability of destroying the Demon King Demise, who threatens the world, as well as all his demonic creations. He too had a Master Sword, except this one is dark and inverted in appearance. The spirit of this sword is the cunning and evil Girahim, who repeatedly thwarts the hero's efforts on his journey. After bathing it in these 3 sacred flames, Link has the blade blessed by Zelda, a human incarnation of the goddess Hylia, which transforms the blade into the Master Sword we know today. Finally, at the end of Skyward Sword, the first game chronologically in the Zelda timeline, the Demon King Demise establishes a curse upon his destruction, so that his hatred shall forever persist. Those who share the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero, they are eternally bound to this curse. An incarnation of my hatred shall ever follow your kind, dooming them to wander a blood-soaked sea of darkness for all time. And so, over the ages, the Master Sword must be repeatedly used by subsequent incarnations of the hero to fend off Demise's mirroring human incarnation, the Gerudo King, Ganondorf. In conclusion, the Master Sword is well and truly deserved of its spot on the Video Game Swords Hall of Fame, with an interesting backstory and awesome design, full of references to the games it hails from. For this reason, in terms of a backstory, I will give it a 9. It's very well done and it's an awesome sword. But let's go on to the next one. Next, let's talk about the infamous Energy Sword from the Halo franchise of games. This pick will be a little different from the others, in that I don't know much about the Halo franchise, nor the sword's backstory or context, so it'll be more focused on the design of the sword. I chose the sword from Halo despite me not having too much experience with the franchise, although I have played it a few times, as I wanted to add some more diversity to this list. There are dozens of swords from Xenoblade and Zelda that are bloody awesome looking, but I didn't want all the ones I talked about to be from one singular franchise. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about the design of Halo's mythical Energy Sword. The Energy Sword from Halo is most likely the most distinct and untraditional sword design-wise in this video. It does away with many traditional aspects of regular swords, such as there not being a pommel and guard on it. Its shape is also incredibly unique, with there being 2 distinct blades this time around rather than just one, and there is a gap between them. These blades make up most of the sword, and they are directly connected to the grip at the bottom, and they have an almost hologram-like appearance which shines a cerulean glow. The way the blade appears is also like that of a hologram, with only the handle being visible when it's not being wielded. When picked up, the blade appears incredibly fast, crackling with an ethereal blue lightning. It is said to be made of pure plasma. The 2 blades are both incredibly sharp, warding off any enemies who dare to come close to it. It cuts through them like butter. In conclusion, the Energy Sword is an awesome sword in terms of design, but excels in looking unique and distinct, whilst not being too over-designed that it's off-putting. For this reason, I'm going to give it a 9 on the design. Next, I'll give some brief context as to the sword's origins and purpose and etc, but most of this is sourced from the Halo fandom site. As I said before, I am somewhat of a novice when it comes to Halo. The Energy Sword is not like the Monado or Master Sword, a singular divine weapon. Instead, it is a mass-produced weapon wielded by many members of the Covenant Empire for exclusive use of the Sankili, who we know as the elites. It is often used for close combat situations, and it runs on a battery which is drained for each successful strike its wielder executes. In conclusion, whilst I don't know much about Halo, the Energy Sword doesn't have as unique or complex a backstory as the Monado or Master Sword. This is clearly a deliberate choice by the developers, however, as the sword isn't meant to be some divine godly artifact, it's just a weapon used by the Covenant. For this reason, it's quite hard to rate in terms of backstory, but I'll ultimately give it a 7. Overall, though, it's another awesome sword from gaming, please don't get me wrong. Next, it's time to talk about a sword from one of my favourite franchises, The Elder Scrolls, and specifically from the 5th game, Skyrim. Of course, I'm talking about the badass Daedric Sword, which is in fact one of the most powerful weapons in the game. First, let's go over its design. Design-wise, the Daedric Sword is simply badass looking, with a very fearsome aesthetic. Sporting a black and red colour scheme, you can tell right from looking at it that it means business. Everything about this sword screams deadly, from the sharp ends of the curved pommel and guard, to the several jagged obtrusions on the blade itself that jut out like teeth, ready to cut through any foe with ease. Overall, the appearance of the Daedric Sword is somewhat similar to that of scimitars, but more awesome looking, with a curved handle and blade that sweep backwards. It is still incredibly unique in terms of its design, however, with its black and red colour scheme and etchings all across it being associated with the powerful Daedra, who primarily are the ones to wield it. This apparently threatening aesthetic fits with the sword's inhumanly origins, with a jagged, saw-like blade, glowing red markings, and an overall design that merges rough, organic curves with smooth, artificial edges. I freaking love it, which is why, for the first time in this video, I'm going to give it a perfect 10 in the design department. In terms of the sword's origins and context, it isn't some singular divine artifact like a Monado or a Master Sword. Instead, it is in many ways anti-divine, depending on how you look at it, being created and primarily wielded by the demonic Daedra. These are entities which inhabit the realms of oblivion in the Elder Scrolls universe, being viewed either as gods or demons by the denizens of Tamriel, the world of the Elder Scrolls. The most powerful of the Daedra are the infamous and terrifying Daedric princes, who each rule over a specific Daedric realm in Oblivion, which acts as a sort of extension of their being. Really though, all this is getting off topic from the sword itself. While I'd love to gush about Elder Scrolls lore and how brilliant it is, this really isn't the time for that. If however that does sound like a thing for you, I recommend you take a watch of a video I made a while back detailing why I believe the world of the Elder Scrolls is one of the best ever created. But back to the sword. In conclusion, the Daedric Sword blends an incredibly awesome design with some interesting context, so I'll give it a 7 in the backstory department. Finally, before I end the video, I want to list some honourable mentions that I didn't include in great detail, as I didn't want the video to be too long. Plus, they are from games I've already mentioned, and I didn't want to flood the list with several swords from one specific game. Right, I'm going to end the video there. I know I didn't cover too many swords, but truthfully, I haven't played many games with cool swords in them, and I didn't want to include some of the more popular ones, such as Cloud's Buster Sword from Final Fantasy, as it's from a franchise I haven't played and I don't know anything about. Anyway though, despite the lacking amount of swords I talked about here, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it was a little bit different, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!